Whenever you're ready.
Hey, good evening, Galleon. Thank you for tuning in tonight. It's our pleasure, my pleasure, to have Amber Wertman, who is one of the county commissioner candidates in the upcoming primary. Without taking up a lot of time, this race is real important because at this point, only 4 Republicans have filed for the position, and so absent an independent candidate mounting a filing after the primary, the winner of this primary will be one of our next county commissioners. And as I think many people who watch these shows know that the role of county commissioners within the local government networks is super important. It's been important for decades, and I think as things have changed a little bit in state government, the role between county government and city government has undergone some changes, and we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that tonight. So from somebody who has spent their entire adult life in elective office, I'm speaking with somebody who's made, I think, an important, a really good decision for everyone to get involved, and has decided to run for commissioner. So I think, why the county commissioner race and why 2020?
Sure, okay. So I do have to admit, I kind of waited till the last minute to make that decision. Of course, I am what you would call a millennial, and we get a lot of flack nowadays. But I don't want to wait another 25 years to try and help the county economically and grow, and just to have some of these countywide services that we've talked about before. And I just felt like, I have work experience, I have educational experience, and the seat was open. I thought, why not? I'm born and raised Crawford County, and I love it here, and I chose to stay here as a young professional, and I'm hoping, as you said, people need to get involved. So I want my kids and our grandkids and our kids to want to stay here and to find jobs here, and we can't do that unless we start planning now. So I would love to be a part of that.
It's real interesting the last couple of weeks. The term boomers. Forever we were talking about this.
Boomer,
Boomers have been like, wow, that's really cool. That was a badge of honor to be a boomer, and now it's like, no, Dad. It's like, no, boomers aren't cool. You're over the hill. But I think it is interesting, and working out how the millennials and the boomers work together.
Right.
There's strengths in both generations. I sort of believe the counties and communities that affect that well, meaning the handoff from boomers to millennials. Those communities will be more successful 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's a balance. I mean, I greatly appreciate all the mentorship. I mean, back 5 or so years ago, we've worked together. I've worked with a lot of the other county officials and people through the nonprofit and social services jobs that I've had, and I think it's important to be mentored and know the history of what's gone on, but also just to come up with some of those new ideas. And as you said, there are changes at the state level where maybe we can embrace some new ideas, more grant writing we talked about, and just leveraging dollars back into the community.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to imagine that people don't know, because you know yourself and what you do every day really well, and you think, wow, I wonder if they know what I do. So just maybe explain what you're doing now professionally in the area, in the community, and how that, and I think it's a logical step into the commissioner's race because of the social service element, which is oftentimes dealt with by commissioners as kind of a maze. They hire somebody else to decode that maze for them, and your experience in working in and around that network, and maybe just share what you've been doing so people know.
Sure. So right out of college, so I have my bachelor's in business administration, and I think I had one job for a for-profit organization right out of college, and I was like, ooh, I want to go back to my internship, nonprofit, governmental side of things. That was just always a passion of mine. So I've worked for the Area Agency on Aging, which of course brings money back into a 9-county area, so a lot of different pots of money you have to maneuver through there. So that was a great learning experience. And certainly then now I'm working for United Way, which kind of has now regionalized, and I'm over a 3-county area for that. Crawford, of course, Marion County, as well as Wyandotte County. So, you know, at United Way, we do very similar things to what a commissioner would have to do. I mean, we have sometimes a very small pot of money for an awful lot of need, and we have to allocate those appropriately, and sometimes we have to make some tough decisions that aren't always popular, but we do that collectively, of course, with the board and advisory councils and community leaders. So there's just a lot of people involved, a lot of getting around the table and talking through things. I think in addition to that, we're the fiscal administrator for several large grants. We have a grant, the money flows through the Ohio Department of Education, but comes from the federal level for, it's called a Gear Up program. It's college readiness to get, you know, we're going to talk probably later about the skills gap that they're calling it, and workforce development needs, so that's really important. A couple years ago, the governor's office had the Healthier Buckeye Grant, which was through Job and Family Services, again, closely related to what we'd be doing with county commissioners. So we wrote a grant for that, and we were able to leverage some dollars back into the community, which was funny. It was called Healthier Buckeye Grant, they called it, but what the grant was actually for an employer resource network, so to remove barriers for people to stay on the job. So I'm not sure why they called it that, but that's sometimes what you have when you get these state grants. So I think, you know, with what I'm doing now in United Way, you kind of always have to be on. I'm used to evening meetings, weekend events, that kind of thing. And sometimes, you know, again, just having all kinds of different conversations, hopefully coming to a consensus of what's good for the whole. But, you know, the conversations are good, bad, and in between. Just depends.
Let's ask a question about how fully, or I'm going to ask you,
sure,
how fully the new United Way has informed and brought along some of the less sophisticated, less administered social service organizations.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a question about local aging club here in a minute, but I mean, how well? I mean, you've been responsible in large part for transitioning from more of a good old boy, an old-fashioned network. It's who you know, to a more what are you doing with the dollars? So do you think you've done enough, or is there more work? Continue to be work bringing along some of the organizations that either privately or more vocally over social media express getting left out. So you're still in transition, and
so that's a big one. I think in anything we do, there's always a need for continuous improvement, right? So we can always do better. We can always be better, whether it be one as a whole United Way, or you know, you bring up, you know, the good old boys kind of back in the day. It was, you know, here's all our partners. This is how much they get every year. It never changes. And I think, again, the correlation to government, that's when maybe it was a bit more prosperous. There were a lot more dollars, so you maybe didn't have to, you know, squeeze some things by. And so now I think the reason we've transitioned to this other model is there just really is an awful lot of need and often not enough resources. So unfortunately, a lot of the ones that have the, I'm going to say, the capacity to do some of the bigger grant work and some of the service of a larger amount of people tends to rise to the top. Now, what we're trying to do to solve some of that is we are, you know, we do have trainings, we offer, you know, hey, here's our new model, yes, but, you know, we want to help them succeed. We want to see them come along.
I heard you go out and critique. I mean, if somebody says, why didn't I get funded? that you'll sit down and say, you can strengthen your application like
Sure.
this, and this.
Yeah. Well, the first
Yeah.
step though is they have to reach out and contact.
Yeah, well,
and
that's right. Yeah,
contact
I mean, that's
us.
true too.
So, you know, we
Right.
want to be there to help.
But you also know who didn't get funded and who's like, wow,
Sure.
gee, we weren't expecting that.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, but
And what we could do though
Yeah.
is even if it's not resources from United Way, you know, say we all reach out, we sit down at the table, okay, let's figure this out. You know,
Right.
we can't give you this much, you know, funds are down this year.
Right.
How can we though help you to find other resources? A
Right.
lot of times there are, like I say, even in the United Way world, across the nation really, it's becoming quite popular to supplement annual campaigns with grants. Because
yeah,
there's
that
just
makes
more
sense too.
grants.
Yeah, the other thing, two things, and let's get off United Way because that's kind of
Yes,
where
sorry.
you're at, not where you're trying to get.
Yes, thank you.
Let's go to.
But I
'cause
would be happy to
all
answer
right with
any of
that,
those
man.
questions.
I'm afraid we'll dwell on it too much, and
Yeah,
and that
I
isn't
could talk
fair.
about that for
isn't
days.
fair. Related topic.
Okay.
There's a perception in the Gallion area. This is here comes the mayor of Gallion, the Homer part of it, that countywide services to seniors are imbalanced.
Sure.
That the county council on aging it has an imbalance of services. I don't know if you don't have to agree with that. Here's the question.
Okay.
How would you make sure that seniors in Gallion, not just the Golden Age Club, but kind of the Golden Age Club, that if there are additional taxes, because I think it's probably pass. I have no position on this, and I'm asking Amber.
Is that
for this.
you supporting the senior service levy?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, man.
Yes.
I'm just saying I got no position on it, and I won't be talked into it.
Okay.
But
Shoot.
But I expect it's going to pass.
Sure.
So for Gallion area property taxpayers, how do we avail ourselves of more services, or is there some way in which there's a higher service level that is in the offing for that? And I'm not talking about Meals on Wheels and all that kind of stuff, but is that just an unfair perception? County Council on Aging provides services over here at an equal amount, or is there work to be done that the commissioners can play a part in?
Sure. I think like I said earlier, I think there's always more to be done. I mean, I think we can always improve. So to that, I would say having a background with the Area Agency on Aging and serving, I serve on their foundation board currently, and I think number one, it's an education piece just in, and you understand this, how the money even flows from a state level.
Right.
So when the Council on Aging is selected as Crawford County's what they call focal point, right? And so that's who the contract's with. Now, what I think I could do as county commissioner is help to bring all parties to the table and actually negotiate, okay, you know, here's the data, right? Here's how many services you're providing now, whether it be congregate meals, home delivered meals, homemaker services. I think we can always up that as well. I mean, I think there's more we can do, and especially if the levy passes, because as you said, it is an increase, and what I always say, and I know this is kind of one of those, you know, we want things to stay the same, but you know, I think that we can still get good quality services for all, and especially in Gallion. But it just might not always look the same as it has before.
Well, yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say. I think it's well said. It's almost a rapid fire. SCAT.
Yeah.
Good for the county, good for the Council on Aging, good for public transportation. Yeah.
I think it's always good to have, well, first of all, it's a competition, right? So it's always good to be competitive, and you have other services available. At United Way, we always say, you know, no one organization can solve these big problems.
Right.
So if we have a transportation need, and as you know, we do, especially in rural areas, it's a huge need.
Right.
And so the more providers, the more services there will be for not only seniors, but everyone.
Right.
So, I mean, I think it's a good thing. Again, I think it's important as commissioners that we would, one of the biggest things I was thinking about when I came here tonight is, okay, we said, what do commissioners really do? Of course, they're taxing and budgeting and appropriations and all that. But I think what maybe is missing or has been missing is just that we're present at these meetings, that we come to the table and hear and listen throughout the whole county, because how can you really understand, okay, Galleon, this is what we feel like we need if you're not engaged.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's,
so
I would say on
just
the
being
transportation, that's good. I know that in most of the people who watch this, the Galleon area, are the more visibility.
Sure.
Seeing Council on Aging vans, seeing SCAT vans, you just know that, just driving around that there are more trips. And I think my take on it is that SCAT has been additive. It's added to the number of trips. I think overall the data speaks for that, but the balance of trips, it's been a real positive, and what the city of would like to do is build on that partnership.
And I think another way we can do this, and I know you're aware of this, is we actually are in a tri-county collaborative through ODOT. So we have Tim Maseko, who is supposed to be our mobility manager.
Yeah, that's true.
Can we implement him a little bit in this process?
I think that's a good idea. I think the mobility managers would start out as being kind of MRDD focused, and there's a lot there.
It's
there's
really
a whole range
diversified
of needs.
now.
Yeah, I think whether we like it or not, that the main large grocery stores are located where they're likely to be located, and that we've got to do a better job of getting less mobile people.
Yep.
Probably lower income, probably older than the average, but maybe not on either one. Maybe their average income and their average age for the county improve that level of service.
That would be another thing I'd absolutely want to do as commissioner, is that, Tim is willing to come to Crawford County a couple days a week even.
Right.
All we have to do is say, hey, can you help us to bridge these transportation gaps more? And he has, resources through ODOT and state funds to be able to do that. So I think if we engage him also more, it can help.
One of the things that was talked about but didn't get implemented, kind of for lack of funds, out of the most recent ODOT public transportation study, was a regular route for the Galleon area, and we're still interested in accomplishing that. I don't know what available resources are at the county to help subsidize that, but it's good to know that you're SCAT supporter, and
I'm all over that transportation piece. I think that is a huge need, and again, especially in rural areas.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the more we can get on a system, and I think that's what Tim proposes, is that if we all kind of at least had a similar system to use as far as scheduling these rides, and like you said, what's the whole circle, if you will, around, or what's their route. And so if we can figure that out, I think we'd be much further along.
Right. One of the interesting things about that, we'll go to there's an effort to build a new garage over there.
Right. Yes.
In Bucyrus.
Yep. And I think shared space.
And I guess the where I wanted to go is not get off of transportation a little bit and talk about how you affect the countywide stuff. And how do you decide I think we're lacking an agenda, if you will, of county things that there's agreement among elected officials, the mayors in the county, commissioners, any other key elected officials, some trustee reps, of what are the county, are there things we can do countywide, what is the priority? I think that would be an interesting exercise. I'm not sure, it's not just economic development, it's not just the health department.
Right.
I think in the past decade, here's the part where I'm going to stop because this is is that we've had a mixed bag. I think we've been successful Avita, I mean, 25 years from now, who knows where Avita will be? My hope is that it'll continue to be very successful.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a heck of a thing they pulled off.
Sure.
I mean, so it is bigger than it was when it was Gallion and Bucyrus. So a county-wide approach, that sure worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it involved public and private sectors to make that work. Other efforts have not been real successful.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it was the urgency of the need to save the hospitals that caused that to turn out so, with more employment and more services. Right. But how do you go about that? Any thoughts on, okay, I won't hit you with countywide schools, but if you got stuck in this office, we might talk about that.
Yeah.
So
I think there's an underground that talks
it's
about
really right. But in this race, how do you? I mean, some other candidates will say we need to do countywide. We need to do more of it. Can you think? Is there any order that we should do, or that you think would be the best way to approach that?
Well, first, I think I love that you said, in the case of Avita, it's public and private.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll say, even in the work we do now, we have to do a better job of bridging that gap between the for-profit and this nonprofit governmental sector. And I think if you have those private, whether it be businesses, industries, if you have them on the same page on an issue, it's going to really move the needle quicker. If they have a need for it, I mean, it's just usually how it works, right? So I want to touch on that because I think it's important to have these businesses and industries in on these conversations.
That would be,
and sometimes they're a demographic, they're working hard. They don't always have time to get away to some of these conversations. So having, an easier way to get them engaged, I think would be a first step. The other thing though is I was thinking about, if a city has something that's really working for them, it's kind of like I go back to the saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of a thing.
Right.
So you have to be mindful about that. If the city of Gallion has something that's really working for you, and there's just no reason to approach the county, maybe there's just no relevant reason except we all just would feel great if it was.
Right.
I mean, that's not a great reason.
No, I
But
agree
if
with
there
that.
was a reason to, again, leverage more resources, get better contracts, I think when we touched on transportation, we also were talking a little bit about the EMS providers.
Right, that's a real good one.
I understand, or I think I may have this wrong, that Gallion is the backup for the 911 dispatch? Or
I think we back each other up.
Okay, great. So
we back each other up.
So, but I think that's another important thing is learning more about who really is already doing what. And is there a way to streamline it if need be?
Right, I think that's true. I think that to the commissioner's credit, the discussion of countywide EMS, this sort of run up the flagpole, or an effort was made last fall. But that's a really unsolved issue. In Gallion area, we think we have the Gallion Polk Township needs met pretty well.
It seems like people like the service.
Right, and we're willing to expand that out a logical distance. And so that the other adjacent townships, so that we believe that service works well in this part of the county. There's really not consensus in the Bucyrus area, and I think that the commissioners may play a role in that, in trying to get some consensus developed. So anyways, that would be back to this priority. It's like, okay, is it EMS services, countywide or otherwise? Where does economic development, for example, fit in? What's the best way to improve the job market, the opportunities for jobs? And
it's a big conversation right now.
And do the commissioners have an active role, or?
I mean, I think sure, I mean, again, just in being in on those conversations, building consensus. As a commissioner, you have, you know, you're often down in Columbus. You may
Right.
have the ear of people, you know, certain people that could bring resources in or a jobs
Right.
piece. I was just at a workforce symposium last week,
Mm-hmm.
and a gentleman from the governor's office spoke about all of the opportunities they're giving to current business and industry about, you know, tech training
Right.
and addressing the skills gap.
Right.
And in my mind, you know, it's hard to grow economically if we're not already first providing for the current employers we do have.
Well, that's really true.
So,
That's
so
really true. I
I think we need to, again, bridge the skills gap that's here already, which
Mhm.
hopefully that will, I think then word of mouth from our current employers would then be, wow, this is great. You know, we're
Right.
really starting to make a dent in this.
Right.
And then that's when it spills over to outside. And people, hopefully other businesses or investors coming in and say, hey, you know, they really seem to be training these people. They're retaining employees because we
Mhm.
know retention is a big issue.
Sure.
So I think there are some current, through the current governor, there's some resources that our local industries could utilize.
I
for
think
the
that's
skills
true,
gap.
and you can help open up information about that and get the
Right.
pipeline going. What about commissioners' current efforts, and are you in favor of continuing support of the partnership as it's branded itself?
Sure.
Because, you know, like there is at least one commissioner's not who's voiced a lot of concern about that, and there are, you'll find there are countervailing pressures.
Uh-huh.
There, you can't fund everything,
Sure.
and what's the best way to fund that activity? So
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, a lot of effort already over the past decade has
Yeah.
gone into the partnership, and it
Right.
would be a shame to just say, oh, you know, forget
Right.
that, we're going to do something else. I mean, that would be a slap in the face to everybody who's really helped to
Yeah, I think it would
be
be a
on
big
some of these committees and
that's
help
really-
to move that along.
that's yeah.
Now, I will say, I think, and I haven't spoke to Gary or Aaron directly, but I have heard that they are coming out with another 10-year plan or vision, if you will, because I don't think, you know, our 2021 kind of
I
ended.
agree with that.
And now
Amber.
we need the next steps, right? And so I think they're working on that, which is great. The other thing, though, I wanted to touch on, again, as commissioner, I think we have to talk about, we have some of the statistics that this gentleman from the governor's office brought up is that our county is one of the counties who we have a larger population 60 and over than we do of 18 and younger.
Yep.
And
Sure.
that to me speaks to the slow decline in population.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think it starts here at home first. We have to figure out a way to, and you guys have it going on here. I mean, you're building this housing, and I think a lot of people don't understand that's really more for the long run.
Sure.
Not so, I mean, it is for right now, but that's planning ahead. That's that vision
Yeah.
that the partnership provides, and,
Right.
and with help from, of course, the city. If we're going to grow the population and bring more people in, thus more revenue for the whole, then we have to have housing. We have to have some of these jobs. So, I mean, we have to be supportive of economic development and what the partnership's trying to do from that growth perspective. Because if we don't do it now, again, you can't wait 10, 20 years to start the process.
You know, that brings, at least in my mind, up back to something. We'll kind of come back, circle around, and maybe wind things down, see if there's any. We started with this millennial boomer
Yeah.
issue,
Yeah.
and this issue of how we inject reasons for younger people to want to invest here.
Right.
At the outset, you said, you know, I like living here. It's
Yeah.
kind of where I feel comfortable. I feel the same way. I think that in the future, most of the younger people will be people who were raised in small town, rural environment. The idea that you're going to get city slickers, city folks
Right.
to come here, it just doesn't work that way. I learned that
Sure.
from a woman at Timken in
Oh.
HR. She's the one that
We like Timken.
that tipped me off to that about how it's important to look for people
Right.
come from that background. So, but there is a millennial issue. Big issue in the Galleon area is free center or no free center. And do you see, I think
The rec
everyone,
center.
the rec
okay.
center, I think you would see, everybody would agree a new factory, a big factory,
Yeah.
or addition,
Right.
that adds to the economic vitality of the community, jobs, etc. How on board, if that's the right way to say, do you see the Free Center as being part of this economic development game plan and as part of what we need to do to get more younger people than older people in the county?
Sure.
So
Well, first I have to say,
Yeah.
I'm glad you reminded me of this Free
Right.
Center because I guess I'm not as up to date on it. So my
Okay.
understanding was though
Right.
we're supposed to still break ground soon, right? This year or
yeah, I think that's fair to say.
okay.
If it's either, I mean, and from my point of view, it's we're either going to get this thing off the ground this year, or we just couldn't get it air.
Sure.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and I think,
Yeah.
you know, and this could take us down another rabbit
Right.
hole, but I think with that Free Center, my understanding is bringing in traveling teams.
Right.
You know, this goes into more of the tourism. You're bringing outside people in, which is great because
Right.
they're going to eat here, they're going to shop here. A lot of
Absolutely.
taxes infused in that, which
Right.
is wonderful.
Right.
So it's kind of like that economic development having those two different arms, right?
Sure.
Is that are we bringing people in? Which I actually think Crawford County has wonderful tourism potential from a rural,
Right.
you know, community, small town. You know,
Sure.
the big city slickers at least want
Sure.
to come and visit for the weekend.
Sure.
So, you know, I think from that perspective, as far as it, you know, helping our current business and industry and retaining the workforce, maybe. Maybe if they see it and they don't live too far away and they see, it would just be I think it's a marketing thing.
That's
you know?
the one thing that is.
Are they retaining people to come back?
Well, what we hear, and this is anecdotally, but I think there's validity from the people whose job it is at factory X or Y to bring people, younger professionals into the community, that they lack things to sell, and so the fitness group,
Sure.
the group that have families, this is something that they believe in. The other thing I'd want to say, and then we'll jump off the Free Center because I think that's a yes. And
Sure.
I was candidly been a little concerned about the commissioner's office withdrawing support for the partnership. So it's good to hear that
wow.
you don't think that's a good idea.
No, definitely not.
And that you also see if there may be a way the commissioners could increase their commitment to this facility. So that I may be
Well,
putting
now
words
that
in
I'm
your
hearing
mouth,
some of
but-
this, I hope it's not an uphill battle because I wasn't aware that maybe, you know,
But sure, and if it was, if Amber, if it was easy, we'd have got it done.
Right.
There's still
Well, that's
some
true.
resistance, and and it's just reassuring to know that if elected commissioner, you believe in the need and you can see that and see
I
both
would
the
just
development
want to see
and
the new vision for the next 10 years established. I think if we could get that along with the development of the Free Center.
right.
And I know I'm just as guilty. I mean, I'm just as impatient as everyone else,
Sure.
right? But
Sure.
it's like, you know, for some of those people who are not early adopters,
Right.
it might help to really get that new vision for the long term up and running to complement the development of the center, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that's an important. What else? So we've covered a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
My
we've gone
inner
forever.
clock says we're probably pushing around a half hour.
A little over.
A little over. So what didn't we cover that is important to your candidacy
Sure.
and getting the word across to what are largely going to be Republican voters in a year in which many Republicans can't wait to get to the November election,
Right.
but there aren't a whole lot of reasons to go out except in Crawford County this race. So
Sure.
what didn't we cover? What do we need to cover?
Well, there's
as
an
we
awful
wrap
lot
up?
still we could cover, of
Sure.
course. I would just say, first of all, yes, it is the Republican primary, not the general election yet, but please go out and vote, and vote for Amber Wertman, Wertman. And I think that's because, I think I really have some of the most relevant experience to this type of job as any of the other candidates. And I'm confident I can do it. I think it's just staying in it, staying at the table, keeping engaged, which again, I feel confident I could do. But even more so, again, I go back to, I have a passion for the community. I chose to stay here. I hope others will do the same.
Yep.
And I'm just excited for the opportunity. I think we'd work well together.
Well, I think
Mr. Mayor.
I appreciate you saying that.
We'll challenge each other sometimes, but
that's true, Amber. The term of office of this position goes longer than the term of office of the one I'm in. So we'll see. We'll get a chance we get a chance to work with each other for a few years. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do, just to wrap up, is get to know some of the candidates, get a feel for their background. There'll be so little coverage of this. What the TF is able to do, what the Inquirer doing the best that they can. I think if as we finish these and drop these through the city's website, it'll give you a chance to get more than just 2 minutes. I guess there's an upcoming candidates night I'm going to be part of. I guess each candidate gets a minute. So if you can
maybe
imagine
some closing remarks.
Yeah, and closing remarks. And so if you can imagine this last 30 some minutes going so fast that so see if you can cover that in that upcoming meeting, that upcoming candidates night. But commissioners races super important, and excited about having Amber here tonight. And
well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
You're absolutely you're absolutely welcome, and
I will go above and beyond for the county.
There you
tell
go.
you that.
Look right at there into.
So vote for me. I will work hard for you.
There you go. Thanks. All right. Good night.